Well, good afternoon. My name is Mikolaj Kunicki. I'm the director of the program on Modern Poland here at the European Studies Center. This is a very unusual presentation today, considering the focus of our previous activities, that was usually humanities and social sciences. But today I'm very pleased actually to introduce our speakers who are going to talk about the Polish energy sector as well as Poland's contribution to the European energy doctrine. Dr. Michał Kurtyka, who received PhD in economics from the University of Warsaw. He's also a graduate of the Paris École Polytechnique and Warsaw School of Economics. He's the founder and president of Management Board of Energy Design and also founder and president of BPI Polska Supervisory Board, which is a consultancy company specializing in managing complex processes of internal transformation, management, and organization. He's also the author of books and articles on change management, transformation of Polish energy sector, and he also lectured, or should I say, lectures in Poland and abroad. Our co-speaker is Professor Leszek Jesien, who apparently has two PhDs, if I understand.
Sort of, yes.
Sort of.
Yes. One is habilitated, the other is not.
Absolutely. In social studies from the Polish Academy of Sciences, as well as in political sciences from the University of Warsaw. He's the associate professor at the Collegium Civitas University in Warsaw and the head of the Institute of International Relations and Sustainable Development. I should also say that Professor Jesien interests include policies in the European Union, in particular energy, environment and external affairs. He's also the author of numerous books and articles on energy doctrine, including these two gentlemen are essentially co-authors of the forthcoming book, which title is exactly the title of today's presentation, Electricity. It's coming in the next year, or
Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep fingers crossed. And today's discussant needs practically no introduction here at the ESC, Peter Wies, who is our European Union visiting fellow. Peter worked for the European Commission in Brussels for 25 years, mostly in the areas of climate change, renewable energy and taxation. His most recent position was head of cabinet to the European Commission for Climate Action, Connie Hedegaard. And prior to that, he worked in the cabinet of Andris Piegal's European Commissioner for Energy. So we really have actually the panel of three excellent experts on this specific subject. Without further ado, please let's begin.
Right. Thank you for this wonderful presentation, and I'm very happy to be here. We have prepared a number of slides in order to kind of grasp the attention of ours, in order to figure out the narrative better, probably. And I will start, then Michał will continue, and I will return to say a few words in the second part of our presentation. So that's the rhythm of today that we propose. I should start, right, Michał?
Oh, okay.
So the narrative is basically intended, in our efforts in understanding the role of electricity in particular and energy in general, is to draw a picture on three levels, in a sense. First is to summarize what's going on in the energy sector, and the second is to have a particular look, of course, at the specific cases where Poland is naturally figuring as a primary attention of ours, but we also speak for comparative reasons about other cases a little bit as well. And then the third layer is a kind of reflection of our that we want to offer for discussion and for further exploration, what to do with the current situation in the energy sector in general, electricity in particular, in the context of climate change and other elements that we think are important. So, Michał, this is your turn.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So I will not surprise you much saying that electricity is becoming increasingly vital for all of us. We have lots of devices, more and more usage of electricity. It becomes some kind of a ubiquitous, and so you can see that we have just taken two examples from Amsterdam. There was a blackout, and Turkey in March and in April. Both of them paralyzed for many hours countries. You can see Schiphol Airport, which was completely blocked. Hospitals were cut. Tram system was brought to a standstill. And then in Turkey, Prime Minister said that among possible causes, a cyber attack was being investigated also as a possible cause. So we are coming in an era where electricity is becoming ubiquitous, and at the same time we depend on it more and more. And if we lack it, it's becoming really very critical. And then the role of electricity is also complexifying in a sense that, as you probably know, electricity was born in the 80s of the 19th century. So then you can see that is the first DC power station in New York. This one, it was done by Edison. And then in 10 years he did something like 100 of such power stations. But then the direct current has one default, and you cannot transport it very far. So it was par excellence the first localized power source, decentralized energy in this way. And then he was confronted with Tesla and with Westinghouse, who did alternative current power station in Niagara Falls a few years later. And then, as you can transport more easily AC current long distances, then you can have economics of scales. You can have bigger power station. You can transform. You can transport electricity further. Then it has become the standard for this. And then from this point of starting from this point, I mean, electricity was developing very fast. All countries were electrifying. Countries granted local territorial monopolies to companies in order that they could electrify local communities. And that at the end of the 20th century, we understood that it's a little bit too far, because local monopolies has become natural monopolies, and natural monopolies has become a little bit blocked to any change. And this is why we started to liberalize the markets. And we entered into some kind of a different mindset regarding electricity, saying that we need to deregulate it, liberalize it, and then it was coupled with other trends that occurred at the same time: development of telecommunication sector and digital economy. And then all together with also concerns regarding environment and climate, it is bringing another perspective regarding electricity. And right now electricity becomes a modern El Dorado for research and development. I mean, we are looking for storage. We are looking for better ways to produce, store, transport electricity. and electricity becomes also a societal concern. I mean, we start to have an idea about whether we agree or not with high voltage line passing through our village, or whether we agree or not with coal-fired power plant which is being built or somehow in our backyard. So electricity is becoming more complex, and also it becomes more costly, because again the new paradigm is that we need to develop new technologies, new ways to produce energy, and among them the key ones are renewables. Yes, and here you can see that, for example, German government is spending 20 billion euro, was spending until last year, because EEG law was mandated, but was spending 20 billion euro yearly in order to support renewables development in Germany. And to give you a comparison, it's more or less the amount of money that German consumers are spending on electricity on its own. So it's the doubled the cost of electricity. So it's really enormous money. And then International Energy Agency thinks that we will be going this way further on. So subventions for electricity and in this particular case to green energy will go up, and so we will spend more and more money on this. Altogether, we think that we are facing an electricity revolution. Yes, electricity revolution as on societal, political, regulation, technology, government side. We all think that energy or electricity must change. We all have hopes about where and how it could change. So, and at the same time, it becomes as vital as a civic right. I mean, we cannot imagine a world without electricity right now. Yes, so if and this electricity is a backbone of the 21st century civilization. In Europe, and as we develop renewables, as we think that we could grasp new potential with dispersed electricity, and there are concerns regarding coal, regarding nuclear in different countries in different ways. So it's really changing completely the nature of electricity market, and right now we are thinking that electricity markets are no longer adapted to problems of that I just enumerated, and we need another market design. And by the way, Commission will present a communication in June regarding new market design in electricity, and it's part of the energy union package. But that's and so to give you another perspective regarding how much we think that electricity is vital and how far it could let's say change our lives, I would like to have a comparison with telecommunication. So as you know, probably 15 years ago, when we all considered that telecommunication companies are stable for years, pension funds were very keen on investing in telecommunication companies, saying it will last forever and we will need the grid, telecommunication grid forever. Yes, and I remember I was working as a consultant in the privatization process of the biggest Polish telecommunication company, Telekomunikacja Polska, 70,000 people working by that time, or today 15,000. So to give you how it changed. And then on the basis of this telecommunication infrastructure, there was another market which was born, which is how we call digital market. Yes, so Google's and all of this world. And right now, telecommunication market is worth peanuts compared with digital market. Okay, so if you see telecoms, Orange, Vodafone, etc., they are worth nothing if we compare with Google, Facebook, or things like this. And probably we face the same kind of movement with electricity. Based on today's infrastructure, there will be some kind of another market that will develop on top of it. What it will be, I don't know. We can have few hypotheses, but we think that there will be something happening. And as you can see, Google is a little bit on both, let's say, on both parts of the picture, because Google is interesting in electricity market, and Google has acquired parts in Nest. I don't know whether all of you are familiar with Nest, which is it's intelligent thermostats. So you can online via your telephone regulate your thermostat. Okay, and this why Google enters this market, because Google considers that at some point it will be able to manage your home. Yes. And they have bought Nest, they have bought Solar Cities, lots of things like this. And at the same time, there are completely new and completely unattended players that come to work, which are car players. We long ago thought that car industry is locked. There is nothing more to do. Mercedes-Benz of this world are completely dominating all the things. But it's not true. Tesla, electric car. And Tesla is building right now the biggest factory of batteries in the world. Half of the supply of the world will come from Tesla, and it will also probably revolutionize storage of electricity, not only through this new factory, but also through the fact that a car is somehow like a quantum of energy. Electric car is a quantum of energy. So there are people thinking that in a sense we will have this kind of mobile electricity without grids, if I may say, stored in electric cars, because once you have pumped electricity at home and then you move to your office, you can't pump it out, for example, to the grid. Okay, that's a dream. I don't know whether it will come true, but there are people thinking that yes. And again, there is some kind of new services, new markets, including e-cars, that is emerging on electricity infrastructure.
Yes. So that was the future. Let's see what's the current situation on two cases, which is Europe and Poland combined together. I will try to assess the situation in these two countries and then bounce back to the general picture of electricity revolution. So that's probably the most famous picture in terms of electricity and energy about Poland is about coal. That's what our discussant is probably to tell us as well. So we do know that the Poland's electricity mix is generally based on combustibles, which are basically making a major part of coal. And that's the situation. We need to look at, however, into in a more dynamic and comparative way. I would say that's for you. I have prepared a comparison with probably the most advanced country on that path, which is Germany, which does have much more of renewables in its energy mix. They have invested very heavily. Michał has just mentioned the number of its investment, so that produces the effects specifically in solar energy and wind energy. These two figures of 32 billion tons of oil equivalent on Germany and on Poland are, in Polish case, it's a little bit more than 8. seem to be very in a very big discrepancy. However, when we compare them to the and make them relative to the gross domestic product, that is a different picture. It shows that as compared to the general effort of energy of the economy, we see a bigger share or a bigger effort. In a sense, the point that I wanted to make is that all the countries are doing their job in principle. That means that if we compare last 2 decades from 1990 to roughly 2011, that's the latest data that I have digged out for sake of comparison from a reliable source of United Nations. And we relativize them to the per capita. We see that every country is doing its job, and these jobs can be compared to benchmarks of the European Union and of OECD. Interestingly, we have countries that perform fairly well. This is a selection of countries, of course. We do have data on all the EU, but the selection of countries that's concentrating on the region, so to speak, specifically comparing the front runners like Germany with and the United Kingdom to a degree with the other cases. And I will come back to this comparison between front runners and those who do the job a little bit in a different way. So what's this Polish case is about? In our view, it's a selection of objectives and principles in terms of energy and electricity that comes in a certain order. When we think about energy and electricity in particular in Poland, then we understand that it needs to be affordable, it needs to be secure, and it needs to be green, but in that particular order, not in a reverse order. So what we do in this country, we do rely on locally available coal, but there are certain advances on the green path that are done basically via energy efficiency, energy effectiveness, and reliance on biomass rather than on photovoltaics or windmills. How could we explain this order of preferences of affordability, security, and a little bit of the need of greenish approach? Can be seen in the following with the following explanations. I have prepared for you the sharing, the increasing share of industry in the production of the GDP. That's a recent data, but it's basically showing certain trend that is very interesting actually, because it's a trend that has been recognized in a sense more widely with an effect of 2008 and onward economic crisis, that we need in our GDPs a little bit more of industry share than we thought that we could have in the past. So in a sense, this recognition of an increasing of a need for an increased share of industry is something that we do, and it does explain the need for keeping competitiveness of this industry. Otherwise, it couldn't be it couldn't be done this way, I'd say. Then the energy security, which seems to be an obsession of Central and Eastern Europe, but probably Poland in particular, for those of you who have observed the European politics for a longer time. It's probably an obvious thing to say. That can be explained in a sense with a picture of geographic distribution of certain distribution. The key to that understanding is, of course, natural gas system, and that the Central and Eastern Europe is being bypassed by two projects of the Nord Stream, which exists already, and the South Stream, which has been abandoned recently by Gazprom and Russian Federation, and it has been replaced by the Turkish Stream project. But its logic is generally the same, to bypass these well-established lines of transmission through YAMO and Brotherhood pipelines, and to go rather bypassing the Central Europe. As this strategy can be understood from the point of view of the exporters in terms of diversifying their routes of exporting, and it can be understood from the perception of the main markets in Germany and Italy, it is differently perceived in Central and Eastern Europe, and it does underline the question, or it does underline the notion of security. For the European Union and Poland is a specific conjunction in a sense, because the European Union provides a menu of policies for a longer period of time already that is combination of energy, climate change, and environment protection with a certain seek for the technologies. But there is a menu of policies which run in parallel, which are negotiated, renegotiated partially from time to time between the players, but they are never coherent enough to make a policy on its own. So very recently we've got this Energy Union project, which tries to reconcile these various policies of the past, but it's in fact it's rather a combination of various traditional approaches that it provides anything new in particular. So what we have is a kind of lesson that we want to draw from the perception in our case, what Michał and me we are thinking, is that the general European picture is composed of the front runners and those who follow them. And the front runners are specifically organized around Germany and its Energiewende. But in there are countries like Poland which are rather front runners, and they will remain so. And it's not our case, or it's not our line of argument that we are going to jump into the bandwagon with Germany and will remain with them, but rather that we are going to follow that path. And secondly is that many of policies that I have just mentioned, this position of Poland in the European Union and its policies on energy and electricity in particular, it doesn't really address the observation of a looming perception or a looming possibility of electricity revolution the way Michał has tried to portray it. So what we need, in a sense, we need to compare two different, in order to go along this path further, we need to compare two different energy approaches to the energy in particular. One that we call the market-driven, that has produced the shale revolution in the United States, the unconventional hydrocarbons, either the natural gas or the oil. And then it does emerge these days as elements of new approach to electricity via things like new electric cars and the inventions of storage of electricity. And that market-driven approach to energy needs to be compared with the approach that we see in Europe, which is rather an idea-driven approach. There are certain ideas that are then tried to be implemented in practice, and this is the two ideas that were the driving words, perhaps, of this market-driven approach to the energy is decarbonization, and in the case of Germany, it's Energiewende. These are slightly different things because the decarbonization puts more of an attention to the fact of a qualitative change of economy, while the Energiewende gives more of a accent to the change of industry in itself, while at the same time trying to arrive at decarbonization. So it's in our conclusion, we wanted to say that it seems to us quite obvious that we are going to face this revolution one way or another. This is going to be both Poland and the EU, the front runners and those who follow, but not at the beginning of this race. And this revolution is going to be basically concentrated in the transportation. So what we need, in a sense, to address in terms of public policies, both in countries like Poland and in Germany and in the European Union, is how to combine our public fine-tuning of a regulatory regime and public expenditure in order to address specifically electricity in transportation. That could be done via different things like the public electricity transport or schemes for enhanced private and business electric cars. All these schemes to build the recharging networks which are necessary to start it. And then how to get into grips with the emerging autonomous transportation, which is yet another quantum leap forward on top of the electricity transportation. Once we start to imagine that on the vast scale, this Google car is going to circulate, which is not any longer a science fiction, but it's already being practiced, then we see the scope of a challenge for all of us in this sense, Europe and its member states. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Well, good evening. Thank you both for the excellent presentation. Now, just so that the audience know, I normally work in Brussels, okay, on climate and energy policy. So I've seen Poland over a number of years in that context. And I want to make it very clear at the outset, I love Poland. And I want its full success. And it has been very successful, I think, during the crisis. It never went into recession. So certainly Poland, has to some extent shown the others, how it can perform extremely well. But I'm worried about Poland because I sincerely believe that the government needs to rethink a bit its approach towards the energy revolution that we have had described, because it's going on all over the world. It's not something that's just European. Renewable energy is improving its penetration of electricity markets all over the globe. Technology costs are coming down very substantially through the efforts of a whole number of countries. Germany's being very generous because Germany's subsidizing these technology costs coming down. But there is a transformation taking place. And to some extent, I sense that Poland is wishing this transformation wasn't happening. Now, you can wish it, of course, but it is happening. And so the question, I think, for Poland is how to engage with it constructively, starting from its different starting point, because it has got a very special starting point, and most notably the endowment, the natural endowment it has got, means that it's very coal dependent, as we've seen in the figures, for historical reasons. Not all of that coal now comes from Poland. I think a substantial share of it is imported coal, which I think is interesting and one must remember. But there is still in Poland a very substantive coal mining business, and of course that has coloured political thinking. But I think that Poland ought to be more open to the structural change that Brussels is basically asking all of the European economies to make, so as to decarbonize in the longer term. And I would say that we have taken enormous efforts so far to always differentiate between the countries of the European Union, not to ask Poland to do the same as, Latvia or, or France or Spain, because they're all different. And so we've differentiated enormously, and so far we've been, relatively generous to Poland, saying, okay, well, we won't ask so much of you, or we give you some kinds of derogations that will make this transition happen slower in Poland. I'm thinking of environmental regulations on industrial installations, where the transition periods are quite substantial. But in the end, what I think Poland has got to do is, for its own interest, is to engage with this transition and to try and say, all right, we're going to try and improve the performance of our coal-fired power stations. We're going to try and improve our performance in renewable energy, and not just biomass, because at the moment you saw a huge share of biomass, and of course it's that it's cutting down trees and burning them, and that's, of course, it can be done very sustainably, but it's not very high-tech. And so Poland isn't really getting jobs through manufacturing wind turbines, which is what's happening in many other countries. Even if the companies are foreign companies, GE, Vestas, they're coming to countries and assembling turbine factories there. So, there is some added value in being a host to manufacturing capability. The UK motor industry, which was very big in the past, is now very small. It's got a few successful brands like the Mini and Jaguar Land Rover, but a lot of the manufacturing capacity when I was a child, British Leyland, has all closed down. But actually we've discovered that manufacturing cars for Toyota or Nissan is also good business for Britain. So I would say that by embracing this renewables transition more wholeheartedly, Poland, which is an attractive country for other reasons, might be able to attract manufacturing capacity that would then be used both in Poland and for exports as well. So I feel that the energy markets in Poland look rather old-fashioned. I think actually it's a fact that the infrastructure is old. The power capacity that exists is rather old. And so in a way, this is a perfect time when you need to attract new investment. This investment, the new power stations that might be built, would almost by definition be more energy efficient than what they've got. So straight away, I think on an energy efficiency point of view, and indeed greenhouse gas point of view, Poland could become a star pupil. But what it's not managing to do, as far as I can see, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it needs to attract new investment. And I know of a case of some big companies, energy companies in Europe. EDF was one, EDF of France. They were going to go in and make a major investment in a power station, but they didn't in the end. And the reason was all about pricing control. And in the end, the government wants to keep prices down. But the trouble with that is that the investors can't get the returns on their investment that they need, so they don't invest. And basically, time's running out. That old infrastructure is getting older and older. There has to be new investment. So I would hope that Poland in the future, and there's elections later this year, I don't know how much I can hope of those, but I would hope that Poland opens up to the ideas that Brussels is advocating now of embracing liberalised energy markets, of opening competition, of decarbonising through energy efficiency improvements if you stay with the same fuel, or alternative fuels, because we think that structurally for an economy those are the best guarantees of continued prosperity. Basically, the world's changing. We can't stand aside from that change. And what I really fear is this sort of scenario. And forgive me for painting such a bleak scenario, but just for the case of this discussion, I will do so. Look at the Eurozone, where the Eurozone is 18 of the countries in the European Union. There's the strong, successful economies like Germany in the lead. There's the followers, everyone else follows Germany. And then there's a few problem cases at the back who've had major bailout programs through the IMF. I'm thinking Portugal, Ireland, Spain got a bit of help. But these economies seemingly are on the mend. But there's one economy that hasn't seemingly yet picked itself up, and it's Greece. Greece is falling far, far behind. Now, the analogy I'm painting isn't that, I don't want to say that Poland is yet like Greece in energy markets, but I fear, I'm just trying to say for the purpose of the illustration, I fear that if Poland tries to pretend that the world isn't changing and doesn't make the structural changes it needs to make in the energy markets and relies excessively on coal, it will find itself as the laggard of the energy union that we are building in Europe at the moment. Now that would be a real shame, because in a way you deserve much better than that. Your economy is much stronger than that. But of course your economy will suffer if your energy sector's not performing well. So think ahead, I would say to Poland. Try to consider very fairly the recommendations that are coming out of Brussels. Not that we're always right, but be careful of the equivalent of the oil curse. The oil curse is a country that basically produces oil, makes lots of money from that, and doesn't diversify its economy sufficiently, and then when there's an oil price collapse, everything goes. That's called the oil curse. And I wouldn't like there ever to be a coal curse, so don't get into mindsets that might endanger the successful economy that Poland has had in the last 10, 20 years, and everyone admires, I might say. Let that continued prosperity continue long into the future, but you will need a very robust, modern energy system underpinning it. So I say, let's look ahead at decarbonisation, liberalisation, and decentralisation of energy systems, which are, if you like, the caricatures that you painted at the beginning as everyone embracing. Poland too, please. Okay, thanks very much. And sorry to all the Poles who were listening to that and may have felt I was criticising Poland. I'm trying to say what needs to be said, in my view, from the position I am, which is decarbonisation is my primary goal, but also thinking ahead to to the economic well-being of Poland. That's what I want.
Perhaps we are sharing your opinion.
Well, you could do, but in that case, I would just say the government needs to get that message.
Exactly.
Because we know the same people in the government. I've been in Poland several times over the years, talked to many of the ministers. it does feel different in Poland. I don't feel so welcome, to be very honest. But I mean, that's because I came on the climate change fire and or on renewable energy. But Poland has great potential. It's a big country. It really could do great things. Stop.
Okay. Leszek and Michał, would you like to respond to this, or shall we basically go for Q&A? Let's respond.
Yes, why not?
You should.
Yes, why not? Sorry.
Extra
Aha.
slides. The weapon, secret weapon. Yeah.
We thought that it's going to be like that. Well, CO2 emissions change 1990-2010 per capita. Where is Poland?
In the middle.
In the middle. Why shouldn't be at the beginning? Who is at the beginning then?
How do you mean? Whose emissions have
Whose
fallen?
emission has been cut the most?
Romania.
It's Romania, Bulgaria, Latvia, Lithuania, Germany, indeed,
Yeah.
United Kingdom, wonderful, Slovak Republic, Czech Republic, France. Poland is somewhere in the beginning.
Yeah.
In the middle, sorry. The work was done. I mean, you painted a picture which is a little bit probably too bleak.
Yeah. Maybe.
And-
I was
and-
making a caricature, if
Yeah.
I may say.
But then you need to return to the hard data. Some countries are doing worse. Some countries are doing better. The general picture, right? The general picture that we did show you at the beginning shows that we are more or less at the level of the EU, slightly less at the level of the average OECD. Well, you are right to claim that we could embrace the case. My argument with Michał was that it's probably too costly for the country at the pace Germany gives. It's probably too costly for the country at the pace of United Kingdom. But then what I wanted to say as well, if you are
It would be great to get that same set of data
uh-huh.
from, say, 2000 as a base year, deliberately eliminating the 1990s, which were a decade of transition.
Well, but that is true for different countries.
Of course, but
Yeah.
do everybody from 2000 or
Mhm.
2005, and
We could
it would. I would be interested to see what lessons.
You have this one.
Well, yeah. One funny thing that I tried to do when I did the calculations for today is, well, the emissions is harmful, right? The one way is to cut it, the other way is to absorb it. So,
Yeah.
one thing is to try. I mean, these are all artificial ways of approaching. They're not
But it
kind
works.
of universal.
Yeah.
But it is, right? So you can plant more forests.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But if you calculate the amount of emissions per square kilometer of the forests, then you've got the best performer, who is Slovakia. And France is good, surprisingly to me. But Poland is doing fairly well. Who is in the back of this story is the United Kingdom, because of the lack of forests.
Have we got a lot of foreign? We don't have
Yeah,
any
I
forests.
know. That's a historical reason, isn't it? Right?
They made ships
Yeah, exactly.
when we were making.
So we do have, all of us, certain histories. in
Yeah,
the
of
past,
course,
right?
of
We
course.
do try to figure out how to proceed, but we need probably to recognize these paths.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to add anything?
I think that's extremely extremely happy, because I think we share the same vision of the transformation. Of where is the world heading?
Yeah.
That is true.
And I think that Poles probably are not smart enough in Brussels to share this more general, broader view, rather than focusing immediately on things they are defending. our point with Leszek is not to say that coal is the only legacy that Poland should hold on for centuries. Does not make sense. Technological progress is here, and we have proved by these 25 years of transformation that the society is able to adapt extremely quickly to extremely big changes. And among them also coal industry, which was very much restructured. Then the question becomes of a certain balance, and as Leszek has presented, the country has done very important progress in terms of environment spendings, in terms of CO2 emissions, in terms of CO2 absorptions. I mean, Poland is producing as much CO2, you know, of course, very well, as Denmark per capita. Well, whether anybody claims that Denmark is back-looking country, no, we think of it as a front runner, and still we are at the same level of. So the question is not of whether we are we do not share the same diagnosis. The question is whether we are able to follow the same therapy.
Yeah.
And then the question is also whether what you said very intelligently, that behind this renewables revolution there is an industry coming. The question is whether this industry must be localized where the biggest subventions are. I mean, if we take the argument of wind turbines, whether in Poland there will be a wind turbine industry that will develop because Polish government would adopt such or another attitude towards renewables. My guess is probably not, and hopefully this is because of united common market. Yes, the same argument would be, and I was laughing a little bit, reminding to me that Poland is producing is one of the biggest producer of yachts and luxury yachts in Europe, and still we do not think about increasing the production of yachts by subventioning Poles' consumption of yachts. We are exporting yachts. So I mean, I'm also a little bit exaggerating the argument, and sorry for that. But the question is, and we are here beneficiary of a common single market, and we are very happy of it. And so we can buy Vestas turbines from Holland, and I don't think that Poles will be able in quick time to develop competitive technologies regarding winds and photovoltaics, as billions and billions of euros are spent around the world for it, and we are a little bit far in terms of just a moment in terms of this technological transformation. So that would be one thing. Another thing that you mentioned very interestingly, it's in investments of big energy companies, and you mentioned EDF.
Yeah.
And it's a very painful example of non-transforming Polish coal sector.
Yeah.
Because as you know perfectly, Ruda project, which was construction of a supercritical 900 megawatts power block in Rybnik, in south of Poland, very clean in terms of compared with existing park, because 45% efficiency compared with 35 efficiency in Poland in mean. And this project was not abandoned because of Polish government's price control rigidity.
Okay, why then?
This project was abandoned because it did not received free allowances based on the new project agreement from 2008. This project would have been continued if it was not the case.
Well, that's we could discuss that.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
it's getting quite technical for the audience. We haven't explained the emissions trading scheme,
yeah, true.
but indeed there have been arguments. what the causes were.
At least there is a balance of arguments, but you are completely right that generally speaking, that's a big question for Poles, whether it is worth investing in coal or whether it should invest in other means. And that's the question which remains open. And I do not want to, I'm not pretending I have an answer. I think nobody has in Europe an answer for the moment. And you are right, and I thank you for this, that the oil curse, and I think that we need to remember this in Poland, that resources is as much a blessing as a curse.
It can be.
It can be.
Yeah.
If I may actually, ask my question or comment, Leszek and Michał, because this is really for you, and I empathize actually with what Peter was saying regarding the political side of this whole enterprise. It really strikes me actually that the whole issue of renewable energy is completely absent basically from the political discourse. Recently we essentially had the presidential elections. We are going to have the general elections in the fall. These are very serious issues which you very intelligently actually elaborated on. But I can't see basically a trace of such debates in the case of the Polish media, in the case of parliamentary debates. Obviously, there was this whole issue basically several months ago, considering the case of the exporter of Russian coal, if I remember correctly, which then we also basically had the last-minute made agreement between the coal miners' unions and then the government, which was very often interpreted as the government's capitulation, basically. So what is going on in this respect? Or is it just basically, a typical case, for is becoming, in my humble view, elementary picture of Polish politics that things basically which are dominating political campaigns had very little to do with genuine economic, social problems.
Should we go on with some questions, because there's something for the public, or should we
absolutely.
I'm sorry,
respond?
Absolutely.
Yeah.